Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. My name is Juan Londoño and today we are going to talk about the 8 principal arguments that come up in photography all the time and how we can learn to argue better so that we learn instead of win. Now this is all inspired by a quote from Karl that says, "The aim of an argument should not be victory, but progress." And I'm hoping that at this point, most of us on this channel, right, watching this, have got to a certain stage of energy in our life where we know that it's never a good idea to argue to demean somebody, to make them feel inferior, or to make ourselves feel superior. Yeah, we're not perfect, and that's easier said than done. And it happens, right? When somebody pushes that button, it kind of kicks off a spark, and then we just go for the juggler, right? And we just want to win and prove that we're better and smarter and blah, 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 right? But that's what it's all about. This channel and many other channels, right, are about becoming better. Better photographers, better people, just better in general, right? So let's get into this a little bit and let's find out what it is we're talking about. Just keep in mind that the video is aiming towards a goal that we should argue to educate and to learn, not to be right and make somebody feel stupid. So, are there any arguments within the world of photography that might give us, that come up all the time, that might give us an opportunity to learn and teach? Oh yeah. Here are the 8 most popular arguments that surface in photography all the time and how we might possibly learn from them. Before we get started, water break. Please go get your beverage. Hopefully it's a healthy beverage, and I will wait back here. Just hit the pause button. So the number 1 argument that comes up all the time, this has to be the number 1. I was going to say they're not in any particular order, but they kind of are, because when I was putting these together, I was thinking of the one that stirs me up the most, right? And it's brand. Camera brand, lens brand, any brand, just brand in general, comes up all the time. My brand is better than yours. My brand invented this, my brand, right? And I did this for a long time because I started with a Canon, right? I started with a Canon F1 in 1984 because I saw a pamphlet for it and it looked breathtakingly monstrous and beautiful. It had a motor drive and extra film canisters on each side, and it just looked like this beast. And I have it upstairs without the film canisters. I should have bought those. I want to see if I can get those just to complete the kit. But it was a very intimidating looking camera, beautiful camera, and you know what? Let me show it to you. Ta-da! I'm back. So here is the Canon F1, right? And this thing is a beast. It weighs, it's hard to hold up like this with one arm. It's a chunk of steel. It's got a battery pack on the bottom. Let me see, I point this way. And then you see a battery pack and then a motor drive and attached to this. And it just weighs, and it's a beautiful camera. I actually have a 1.2 lens for this thing. Whoops. This is a 1.8, but this is the camera I saw, and it had these canisters on the side, extra canisters for film. So when one, was done, the other one would take in the film, and it was just an amazing camera, right? A whole 5 frames per second, and with that motor drive. Otherwise, it was shoot and cock, right? And I think there was another slower mode. But the point is, that was the camera I saw first, and the Nikon F3, which I later, learned about, may have been a better camera at the time, but I didn't care. This is the one I saw. This is the one I wanted, right? And then I became a Canon fanboy, and I preached to everybody how Canon was better. And I don't know if I preached that it was better. I just preached that I really liked it. Later on, when Canon hit the digital market and Nikon was struggling because they went with a different technology than everybody else, and they fell behind like 2-3 years. Canon caught, a head start with digital, right? And it took off. And Nikon eventually, caught up, and Nikon and Canon, I would say, in DSLR world, were neck to neck. Both amazing freaking cameras. Now in the mirrorless world, it's a different story, right? I think Nikon's falling behind a little bit, but they're catching up again. And I hope they catch up and surpass Canon and Sony, because it lights a fire on the Canon and Sony's butt, because right now they're just competing with each other and it's getting dull and they're putting out very similar equipment. So anyway, that's another story for another video. But brand, right? So we need to learn about other brands before we actually argue with somebody, right? We argue most of the time because we know one thing. We know our subject. We don't really know other subjects. And we argue that our thing, whatever it is better, whether it's a camera, a screwdriver, a drill, whatever the heck it is, or a car. And we don't stop to think, how am I arguing with somebody, telling them that my thing is better than theirs, when I don't even know what theirs is or how it works, right? That's a common fallacy in the whole world of arguments. And we can't ever learn anything if we already think we know it all. That goes back to ancient Chinese wisdom, right? The whole cup half, empty, half full, or basically your cup full. If your cup is full, how are you ever going to put anything else in it, right? So empty the mind, come into an argument with an open mind, right? As I've gotten older, I don't care anymore. I don't care about arguments and winning. I like to listen and learn. Sometimes I listen to things and go, ooh, they have a point. I didn't think about that. That might actually work for me as well. And that's allowed me to open my mind to different camera systems. I carry this little Canon, an M6 Mark III. This is my street camera. Now this has a manual focus lens on it right now. I don't always have this lens on it. Beautiful lens. But, if I want to do landscapes, my black and white nudes, right, portraits, I may do this camera. This is a 100 megapixel Fuji GFX 100S. It's a monster, 102 megapixels. If I want to do something a little faster, I could have bought an R5 or an R6, but I still have my Canon 5D Mark III, right? Right here. So I still have this thing. It's a DSLR. And it does fine for now, right? For what I need. If I was doing sports photography, I might have to get an R5 or a Sony Alpha 1 or something, or a Nikon Z9, which is a wonderful camera. But overall, you see where I'm going with all this, right? The whole purpose of, and I'm going to break these down into learning and teaching, right? Each of these points, right? So I don't want to beat a dead horse, but if we're going to learn in an argument, open the mind to what other people have, right? I've seen this in technology, where teams are built to win a competition, and the teams that are more diverse end up winning because there are people on that team that know nothing about the field. Like if they're building a race car, there are a bunch of electrical engineers in there, and they don't have a clue about, car design, right? Mechanical engineering. But so that allows them to ask questions, and that sparks thoughts in the mechanical engineers' minds, and then they end up doing something creative, right? And I have a particular example in mind. I'm not going to go into it here. So listen to people that we think don't have a clue, because we might get an idea. And the teaching part of this argument is, instead of stubbornly trying to prove a point with a camera, show some images. Take the camera out. If I'm going to argue with a Sony fanboy that their menu sucks, instead of saying, your menus suck, my menus are better. You know what? Why don't we pull the camera side by side? Let's look at this for a second. How would you access, a particular thing, right? And this is how I do it in my Canon. And I know that the Sony menus suck. I love Sony cameras. I think they're amazing. They have amazing sensors. They have amazing technology. But it's an electronics company, and Canon, Nikon, Fuji, they're camera companies. So they tend to be a little photographer friendly as opposed to Sony. Their menus are terrible. And many Sony users will tell you this, right? But they're getting better. They're getting better. But if that's not important to you, then you buy the Sony, right? If they might have things that are important to you. The point is, show pictures, pull out the camera, have an intelligent argument instead of, mine is better than yours, mine is bigger than yours. That's not the place for it. Number 2, sensor size. You hear this all the time. Definitely got to go with full frame. There's nothing better, right? Crop sensor is too small. Micro Four Thirds, forget it. It's tiny, right? Medium format, it's useless. It's too slow, it's big, right? Everybody's got an opinion, right? They say opinions are like buttholes. Everybody's got one. I'm sure you've heard that before. If not, welcome to the joke. But so What can we learn from sensor sizes, right? The first thing we have to do is find out from somebody that doesn't have the sensor we have, what are the advantages? I've been shooting long enough and I teach photography that I can tell you, somebody will call me, and this happens all the time. Hey Juan, I feel like I've learned enough after your class. You know, I've been going at it for a year, I've been taking pictures. I'm gonna trade in my crop sensor and I'm buying a full frame sensor. Oh, congratulations, that's a big move. It's a much more expensive camera. Can I ask you why? Well, like I said, I'm better and I think I can do better work with it. Oh, okay. Well, are you shooting anything different? No, I'm still shooting, you know, my kids' soccer games, and I'm getting really in there. I have a 200 millimeter, 70 to 200. Then you're wasting your money. That's what you're doing. Because here's the thing, a crop sensor, that 200 millimeter on a Canon, you have to multiply that by 1.6. It becomes a 320. Or you multiply by 1.5 on other cameras, crop sensor cameras like Fuji, Nikon, Sony, and it becomes a 300. So if you're trying to get close, you want to keep that crop sensor camera. This crop sensor camera not only is my street photography camera because it's tiny and it's wonderful, 32 megapixels, but I could put a 60 to 600 Sigma and it goes up to 9, whatever that is, 950 or whatever, a ridiculous number, right? As opposed to 600 millimeter. If I put it on my DSLR, it's a 600 millimeter lens. So you see where crop sensor cameras might be better. Size for street photography. Everything has a place. So we need to learn why people are carrying certain cameras, and then we can say, oh, I get you. You know what? That isn't a dumb idea like I thought originally, right? Because I was ignorant. We just need to be listening a little more. And if you want to teach during an argument, then you do what I did with my student, right? I listened, I asked, what do you use it for? What do you need it for? And then I said, you know what? The crop sensor is going to be much better for you because that 200 becomes a 320 on your Canon. Really? Well, yeah. Remember, you got to multiply. Oh my God, yeah, I forgot. So don't spend the money. And maybe get a better crop sensor camera with more megapixels, right? If you're going to be cropping in and stuff like that, right? But trading it in for a full frame is not important for you. Now, if somebody comes up to me and says, Juan, I want to make better enlargements. I want maybe a softer bokeh. Maybe I want better dynamic range. Maybe a little better high ISO, sensitivity. Maybe that full frame sensor is good for you. If you have good money and you're not doing anything fast, maybe this 102 megapixel medium format or large format, it's not full frame, it's bigger. 102 megapixel, that's going to give you even better bokeh. So there's a camera for everything, right? So if you're going to teach somebody, explain to them why you believe it's a better choice for them, and maybe they're more willing to listen than, that's stupid. Why do you have a crop sensor? It's small, right? Get a full frame. Everybody's buying full frame. There's no logic in there. Number 3 reason for arguing in photography, lenses. And I'm not talking about lens brand. We already covered brands, right? We're talking about cameras, but the same applies for lenses in that brand conversation. Topic number 1, right? Argument number 1. This is people that say, you got to have 3 lenses, the holy trinity, right? Like a 15 to 35, a 24 to 70, and a 70 to 200. You have those 3 lenses, it covers everything. Even I say that in my videos. If you want to shoot weddings and you can only afford 3 lenses, or you only want to carry 3 lenses, or you want the most important 3 lenses, that's probably it. You want that holy trinity. If you're a better photographer, meaning you've been doing it for a while, you make more money, people know you, you're getting good work, maybe an 85 millimeter 1.4 or 1.2 for some really good bokeh, right? Beautiful portraits, or 100 millimeter 2.8 is a wonderful lens, right? Now the 135 millimeter f2 or f1.8, gosh, these are getting better and better. Everybody's going to have a different reason for buying different lenses. Somebody that shoots street photography is going to want something wider and flexible, right? That also maybe like a 2.8, 24 to 70. And that's a big lens. If you have a little camera like this, the kit lens for that is kind of crappy, but I use it. It's a 15 to 45 on a crop, which ends up being like a 24 to 70. But it's not a 2.8, right? It's all over the place. So I've put a 22 millimeter f2, which ends up being like a 35 millimeter in this equivalent, right? Full frame equivalent. And at least it's an f2 and it gives me a little more light, right? For when it gets a little darker. So The important thing here with lenses, I digress, right? With lenses, everybody's going to have a need to shoot a different lens, right? Some people don't need anything more than a kit lens. And if you push them to get something better, you're kind of wasting their money. Some people need something better and they're stubborn and think that their kit lens is enough. It's the opposite, right? Some people shoot more telephoto. Some people shoot more wide angle. Some people just need a standard lens, a 50mm equivalent. So it depends. The important thing is, if you're going to get into an argument about something like that, always ask, what do you shoot? Oh, so that's why for you, that's important. That holy trinity is very important. I get that. You're a wedding photographer, 3 lenses and you do it all. I'm a landscape guy. I don't need those 3 lenses. Well, yeah, you do, because what if you need an eagle? No. I don't need pictures of eagles, right? I shoot landscapes. I don't do wild birds. I don't do anything like that. So I can technically just get away with a 24mm. And if I put it on this 102 megapixel camera, I can crop it in all the way, like a quarter size, and I still have a 25 megapixel image, right? So a 24mm, a 35mm lens is all I need. If I get a 24 to 35, oh, beautiful. I've got everything covered, right? So if I want to keep 2 lenses, I can play around. Just be educated when you speak to people, listen to them, and then say, I agree with you. You're absolutely right. For you, this might make sense. And you know what? If it doesn't make sense for them, just say, you know what? You might not have a good reason to have those lenses. Let me explain why. When you have conversations like that, people actually stop and listen, right? And you say, for me, would you agree that because I do this, this might be a better lens? When you ask instead of tell, then they listen and go, maybe you're right. I can see that. I can see how you might just need that one lens, Maybe you don't need the Holy Trinity. So ask questions. That's an important way of getting around arguments. You make people think. Nobody talks about a lot of details when we talk about lenses. There's chromatic aberration, there's distortion, diffraction, weight, size, sharpness, all these different things, right? The types of shutters, a leaf shutter, it's all important. And many times we don't even know enough to bring up those topics, right? So you want to inform yourself and at least become familiar with the lenses you have. Watch 2 or 3 videos on each of those lenses. Become familiar with the kind of chromatic aberration that's appearing, the kind of vignetting, I didn't even put that in here, the kind of vignetting that they're giving your camera, right? The kind of vignetting that gives other cameras, right? It's all about learning and then just keeping an open mind. Reason number 4 for arguing in photography. Software 1 versus software 2. Do you use Photoshop? No, I use Lightroom. No, I use Capture One because I shoot mostly Fuji. Well, in that case, maybe that's a good reason, right? It's down to, people will argue about the software almost like they work for the company. Like, that other one sucks. It's useless. I tried it. I didn't like it. It's too complicated. It forces me to organize my... You know what? What I'm learning after years of using all of these different tools is that they also apply for better for certain things, right? I think for me, I'm not telling you what to do. For me, when I go out and shoot mostly landscapes, I think Lightroom is just easier for me to edit my landscapes. But if I shoot a model and I'm shooting only this model, can I use Lightroom? Yes, I can. But Photoshop, for me, is just much easier, especially if I'm picking her off the backdrop. Yeah, you can do that in Lightroom now. It was just always a step ahead in Photoshop because that's what it does. Do I need to take little pimples out, do this, correct some hair? Photoshop, right? But you might have a different reason. And there's Capture One for people that shoot Fuji. Most of them like Capture One because they say it's quicker, it does a better job representing their images, and better for tethering. Lightroom does fine for tethering for me. So again, listen to what people need. Find out if that's good for them. There might be, there might be no argument there. Once you listen and ask a few questions, you might say to yourself, there is no argument. This person's absolutely right. That's fine for them because this is fine for me. The analogy to this software 1 versus software 2. Back in the day, BMW and Mercedes-Benz were 2 very distinct car companies. BMW was a driver's company back in the 70s, right? Very much for the driving enthusiast. Cornering, acceleration, thrill. It was the thrill. It was the ultimate driving machine, right? I don't even know if I see that anymore. Mercedes-Benz was a luxury car. And they tried to get on the track and the car almost flew off the track, right? It was very heavy. The suspension wasn't made for cornering, wasn't very fast. It was luxury. If you wanted a luxurious car and you wanted to be up there in the echelons of society, then you bought that classy Mercedes-Benz. But as time went on, Mercedes tried to compete with other companies that were racing. And BMW was trying to make a more luxurious car. So they started making the 7 Series and started packing it with electronics and luxury. And Mercedes created the AMG version, or started working with the AMG division and started racing their cars. And all of a sudden, the lines started to blur and mix, right? But where I'm going is, at the beginning, sometimes we have the ability of saying, this is better, because it is better, because the other software isn't made for that. But as times go on, you're seeing it now in Lightroom and Photoshop. Lightroom is starting to take on some of the character of Photoshop, and Photoshop is starting to do some of the things that Lightroom does. And it's going to get to a point where it's just going to be a matter of which one are you happier using? Which one do you like? When they started, personally, I wasn't happy with Lightroom. What I needed to do most, I did in Photoshop. I can't say that anymore. So again, which software do you need? Well, find out what you need to do. Are you putting your stuff on social media? Are you printing? Is one of those softwares better? Or maybe one of the formats that you save it in is better, and you can do that in any software. What are you doing? Watch a couple of YouTube videos on the softwares that you don't own, right? Capture One. I don't own Capture One. Play with it, don't own it. Maybe what I ought to do is watch 3 or 4 videos really to saturate my mind in it and decide if it is going to be a good software to own, or if I should just keep my Photoshop and Lightroom for my Fuji as well. And again, if it comes to getting into an argument with somebody that's trying to force Lightroom down your throat and you're a Photoshop person, or vice versa, right? Or Capture One or any other software, listen to them and then say, you know what? My computer's right here. Let me show you something, right? I've used Lightroom, I've used Photoshop. Let me show you what I'm talking about, right? Pull up a picture and say, I want to separate this. Look how much easier it is for me in Photoshop. Or I want to do layers or masking, right? Look at the many more options I have in Photoshop for this feature, right? For what you're doing, right? That might be good for you, but for what I'm doing, and when you show somebody, they go, oh, wow, I didn't realize that Photoshop had all those different little, tools for masking, because in Lightroom, masking is very basic, right? And then you just turn somebody on to something that they might be interested, right? And you didn't have to fight with them. Argument number 5 in photography, you've probably heard it. Black and white versus color. Which one is better? It depends. When I started with black and white, it was more of a thrill. Ooh, this looks different. I mean, I knew very little. I had never taken a photography class, right? So I was teaching myself all along, talking to people that knew. Saw a lot of books. Ansel Adams and all the famous people were shooting in black and white. Because, why were they shooting in black and white? Because they had no option back in the day, right? So I felt creative and I felt artistic by shooting in black and white. As I matured, I went up a level and I realized that I can now shoot in black and white when I had textures to represent, when I had contrast maybe, when I had different things like that, right? Whereas if the scene was, very saturated with colors, maybe color film back in the day was going to be better than black and white. And that was a level above. I was actually thinking at that point. But if you read enough books, as I've started to lately, on black and white photographers and the thinking behind it, right? There's a way to think in black and white that I wasn't even aware of. There's an app for the phone, which I don't have right here, which you can, I'll put it in the description below, right? So look for it. When I'm out with black and white film, with a digital camera, you can make it black and white so you can see in black and white, right? And if you shoot in RAW, you're still going to get color. And then you can turn it in black and white later, right? And you can save RAW and JPEG, and that way you get color and black and white out of your pictures. But in a film camera, which I'm shooting now again, if I put black and white film through there, I look through the camera, right? The peephole, ViewFinder, and everything is in color. So I'm not seeing in black and white. There's an app, you put it up on your phone, you tell it what camera, what film format you have. Is it a 6:4:5? Is it a 6:7 medium format? 35 millimeter, you tell it what, and then you tell it your millimeter for the lens, your focal range or focal length. 50 millimeter, 35 millimeter, and it frames a little thing and it shows you in black and white so you can see in black and white. It's a tool, right? So it helps you, especially when you're starting out. If you're starting out with a camera, a film camera today, and you've never shot film, I think it's a great little tool. I think I've done enough black and white, and I've seen enough black and white that I can get to a location, I can look at a mountain and think in black and white. And that's important to get there, right? That's what we're striving for. That's what this app is helping, right? So the whole point now is when you get into a scene, especially if I have a digital camera and I can go back and forth between black and white and color, I might look at a scene and say, this is a color scene, definitely. I might get to another location just, a quarter mile down the road and look at that and go, oh, my, look at the texture of the rock, look at the contrast, look at the clouds. Oh, put a red filter on here and I can bring the sky out. So you start thinking in black and white, right? Now you're not just looking at texture and contrast, you're thinking in black and white, and you're thinking of how to frame that so you bring the most out of a black and white picture. So what's the point? If you're arguing with somebody and they're telling you black and white is better, and you've been shooting a lot of color lately, ask, why is black and white better for you? What does it do for you that makes you feel it's better? Let them talk for a little while and say, okay, I heard you, right? Let me tell you why I think color is better for me, right? And then you start talking about what you're doing. Yes, of course, they're going to have feedback for you. Well, you shoot sports. Black and white would be nice too. Yes, it would be. And I've shot some black and white in sports. But the color of the uniforms is very important to the team, right? Especially when the two uniforms are blue. Oh, I get that, right? So that's why color is more important for me. So you start having these conversations, and I'm just giving you examples, right? It's the same theme over and over again. Listen, ask questions, converse instead of fight. And when it comes to teaching, you did both. You listened, you learned, and by having this intelligent conversation, you also open the other person's eyes. Or I should say, open their mind. Reason number 6, I keep saying reason, argument number 6 that comes up all the time in photography, especially nowadays, that Kodak is hiring. Film versus digital, which one is better? So when digital first came out, there were, studies, and they were saying a film, a 35 millimeter film, is going to need about 20 megapixels. When I was shooting a 6 megapixel camera, 6, which then went to 12. Right? My Canon 10D, which was 6 megapixels, I later got a 5D, which was 12 megapixels. I got a 5D Mark III, because I couldn't justify getting a 2. I think it went from 12 to 15 megapixels. But the Mark III went to 23 megapixels. At that point, digital had paired up with 35 millimeter, and I felt like that made a difference, right? Now, full frame is at 60 megapixels, right? Blue, the 35 millimeter world. Now there's a reason for shooting film. So this is what I mean. Somebody's going to tell me, because I'm shooting film again, what are you doing? It's more expensive. You're wasting your time. Film has blown by. Why do you think people spend $50,000 on a stereo system that has a turntable, a cassette deck? Look it up if you don't know what that is. And an amplifier that has tubes sticking out of it instead of transistors. Those are called analog systems, not digital. And there's a sound to those systems that cannot be duplicated by digital because they're analog. They're different. Digital is very clean. It doesn't have the scratching of a record when the needle is crunching over it, right? But it doesn't give you the same warmth. And that's the word that's used over and over and over when you talk about analog sound and digital sound. It's the warmth. Can you pump it into digital? Yeah, you can fake it. It's not the same. I'm showing my friends lately all the pictures that I'm taking with my Pentax 672 camera, and I show them a black and white and I show them a color of my daughter and my wife, and they look at it and they go, "You're right. Digital doesn't do that. What is it? What am I looking at?" You can't describe it sometimes. And it has to be somebody who's been shooting digital for a while that can look at that and go, even the black and white, look at that. It looks different. Yes, because film used chemicals to give you a picture. This digital camera is using zeros and ones. You can't compare them. Now, is this A good camera? Oh my God. I don't even have words to describe the GFX 100S. It's mind-blowing, right? The detail in a 102 megapixel picture, the sharpness of those lenses developed those lenses for this camera were probably made to handle 180 megapixels because the camera's growing like every other system. It has no problem with 102 megapixels. I keep talking about this. I shot a picture of my daughter in the entrance of the house from the waist to the head with a 110 millimeter f2, which is actually like an 87 millimeter equivalent f1.6. And I showed my friend on my computer, and I enlarged to where the eye filled my monitor, and there was no pixelation. And you can see the car on the driveway, and if there was a freaking cat walking across the driveway, you would see that in her eye. That is this that film couldn't do. I will never be able to do. But what does film do that this camera can't do? The warmth. There's a warmth, there's a feeling, the dynamic range is unparalleled. It's beautiful. And there are days I take my film camera and there are days I do this. It just depends on what I need. So when somebody says, Juan, you're wasting your, or whatever your name is, right? Andy, you're wasting your time shooting digital. Go back to film. Film is so much better. It's warm. And you can say, dude, you can't do with film what this does. Let me explain to you why I need this camera. I shoot landscapes. Sometimes I'll shoot a big landscape and then I decide I only need this little corner. With 102 megapixels, I can crop in and it still looks like a 20 megapixel image. Oh crap, I didn't realize you could do that. Yeah, that makes total sense, right? Conversation, back to that, right? There are different reasons for different cameras, right? Film and digital, I think both of them have always been important, but we got so mind-bent on digital that we just neglected film, and the film industry was going away. Now it's coming back. I'm not only using my film cameras, I'm buying film cameras. Well, and I plan to build a huge collection because I want to be a collector. But, I started by putting, and this is not a film lens, this is a new lens actually, but I started by buying vintage lenses for my digital camera. And for this Fuji 102 megapixel, I bought a Pentax 6x7 2 camera lens. It was a 135 millimeter f2.8, and on this camera it acts like like 105 or something like that, I forget. And oh my gosh, I took a picture here with my friend, he's a photographer. We were looking at the pictures, a digital camera with a film lens, and he was like, it looks cinematic, I guess, right? I want to say cinematographic, but cinematic. We were both in awe. So I said, wait a minute, what if I put that lens on the camera it belongs on a Pentax from the 80s, right? And I buy film. And that's when I went and shot that color and black and white roll. I kept my fingers crossed because I hadn't shot film in 20 years. The pictures came back, and to tell you that they're breathtaking is an understatement. If I had the picture in my camera, I would have just pulled it up to the screen. You know what? I'll include the pictures here. The point again, as always, it's repetition of the repetition. If you want to teach somebody, listen to what they need, tell them why you're shooting your particular medium, and explain to them. That might open their mind a little bit, and listen to them to see if you can learn why they're shooting their medium and if there's anything you can learn. I've already done 2 videos on what digital photographers can learn from film photography because it's that important. One is what they can learn from film photographers, and the other one is what they can learn from film photography. Go onto my YouTube page, look for those. Maybe I'll link them in the description. But make sure you look at those because there's so much to learn. I want to do a video on what film photographers can learn from digital, having done both for about 19 years each now, exactly. Both of them 19 years. This year will be my 20th year. 2023 will be my 20th year with digital. And I did 19 years with a professional film camera. I had done film before that as well, but not a pro camera like that F1, Canon F1. So just have a decent conversation, see what you can learn. If you go into arguments telling yourself at the beginning, I'm gonna learn as much as I can in this discussion, and if the other person walks away mad because they weren't able to convince me, whatever, that's okay, that's their issue, not mine, but I'm gonna learn as much as I can. even that's a start. The update to that, or the sequel to that, or actually the higher level to that is, not only am I going to learn, I want to see what I can teach them kindly, right? And if I'm kind, they're more exposed to listen. Number 7, and I won't try to do this. Yeah, I can do it. Number 7 is JPEG versus RAW. Now, I shoot RAW because I love the creative control it gives me, and I'm anal about getting the best picture I can get out of whatever camera, whether it's a 6 megapixel camera or a 102 megapixel camera. And I know RAW is going to get me that. Is RAW always the answer? No, no. If I go shooting at the beach with my friends, and I know they're all going to want some pictures, and I just want to get them quickly to them, just put them on the cloud for them to access, JPEG. Now, do I want to shoot in both in case there's something there worth printing? Many times I'll deviate from shooting pictures with my friends, and I'll do like a dock, right? Or I'll do a boat, or I'll do somebody doing something, walking on the beach holding hands, and it ends up being a picture that I can either sell or print or post on Instagram or Vero, right? So look up Vero if you haven't, V-E-R-O, very cool place. It's kind of the new Instagram for photographers. So knowing that I may end up doing that, I do JPEG and RAW. And then when I get home, if I don't need them, I delete all the RAWs. And I just give my friends the JPEGs and we're done for the day, right? So there's a reason for everything, right? So again, listen to why a person is shooting JPEG and they're trying to convince you that it's all you need. Just listen. There might be one reason in there that even though you may not be convinced that JPEG is the answer all for you, it might turn you on to say, you know what? I could have been doing that all along when I go to the freaking pool and beach. Why haven't I been doing that? Why am I shooting RAW at the beach when I go with my family? There's no reason, right? If you're not one of those creative photographers that's shooting, ducks and birds and weird things like that, and if you're really just shooting family, then RAW is an overkill, right? It probably is. Now, somebody will argue, there's always somebody will argue, no, why is your family less important? RAW, and then you can edit them. Yeah, okay. I'm not going to argue with you because in your mind, that's what you want to do, and that's perfectly fine. For me, if I was just doing pictures of my family, I'm going to keep my megapixels low. I want to make bringing it into the computer a quick edit, and bam, I can put them in an album. That's how I feel, right? And to be honest with you, whether I'm shooting 20 megapixels or 102 megapixels or 32 megapixels, they're all enough and they'll do just fine for an 8x10 or a 4x6 or a 5x7. If you're somebody that shoots Fujifilm, you're going to want to enjoy the Fujifilm simulations. They have simulations in camera for all the film that they make and made. And people love those, right? So they shoot specifically in JPEG so they can enjoy the simulations, because in RAW, you just get a raw image, right? There are no simulations. Now, I will tell you, in case you don't know, if you shoot Fuji, you can shoot RAW. When you bring it into Lightroom or Capture One or whatever you're using, you can bring up some add-ons that have the simulations. So even with RAW, you can see what those simulations look like. Look it up. I haven't got into it because I haven't shot much JPEG in this camera. It's still relatively new to me, and I'm trying to see what it does. So I'm shooting specifically in RAW, but I've shot RAW and JPEG, but I haven't played with the simulations much. I need to, right? Like classic negative and all those cool simulations. People love them. And if you really love them that much and you don't want to spend a lot of time on the computer, JPEG all the way. If you're really anal about what you shoot, you like that control like I do, RAW all the way. And somewhere in the middle is a happy medium. Keep ears open, eyes open, mind open. Learn as much as you can on this topic. Watch some videos, read some books, and if you want to teach, show some pictures. When people come to my class and they say, Juan, I don't want to deal with RAW, I like shooting JPEG, and I found out that I can make some enlargements. What I'll do is I'll print some of my images where I had a clear blue sky, and it's shot in JPEG, and you can see where it goes from a lighter to a medium to a darker. There are rings, like the gradient when it goes into the darker colors. Sorry, you can see rings in JPEG because JPEG is a compression tool. It's compressing the lights together, the mediums together, the darks together, and then there are lines between those. And you see the lines and you're like, where did that come from? It came from JPEG. If you don't want to see that, you have to shoot RAW, right? So I tell my students, I'll pull one of those pictures up that I shot years ago, and then they're like looking at it on the monitor going, I've never seen that. Well, you're going to see it one day, and it may be a regret because you're going to take this picture in JPEG, and you're not going to be able to get those rings out unless you do some heavy editing. And argument number 8, finally, we're here. Manual versus autofocus. Like I just told you, I love shooting vintage glass, right? Because it has a character. Those old coatings used to give little hues of yellow and green, and you look at the picture just slightly, just enough that you look at the picture and it looks classic. And this looks like a vintage lens, but it's actually a new lens, right? By TTArtisans. It's a 50mm 1.2 for $98 brand new. And I put on this camera, I'll include some of these pictures now. So you know I like shooting vintage glass, right? And this isn't vintage, although it looks that way. This is a TTArtisan, 50mm 1.2, brand new lens for $98. I bought it, shot some pictures of my wife, my daughter, the parrot, my friend, Mateos. Looked at them on the computer, 1.2, it was a little soft. 1.4 wasn't as soft, it was sharp. And the bokeh on that crop sensor camera, oh my God, heavenly. $98, but it's not vintage glass. I like shooting vintage glass because, and by the way, Canon makes nothing like a 1.2 50mm for that camera. Now it's manual focus, right? But I bought some vintage glass for my other cameras as well, and I can use it on that camera, and they have a slight hue, yellow, green, just slight. And you can fix that if you want to, but I don't, because it gives it that classic analog we were talking about look. And you look at the pictures, and it takes me back to my childhood, right? They're not so 70s looking that they look weird. They just have a warmth about them because we are still shooting digital. It's not the 70s lens on film, it's a 70s lens on digital, right? So beautiful, beautiful. I told you my friend looked at it and went, oh my God, it looks like a movie, like a clip from a movie. It's so cinema-like, right? That's the word I should have used before. So there's a reason for me buying vintage glass, and vintage glass is only manual. So I'm going to push manual focusing for people that want a certain look, and I'm going to push autofocus. If you're shooting sports, yeah, they used to do it with manual focus. They were geniuses because they did it all the time. I wouldn't recommend it now, not having autofocus lenses, and you don't want to miss a shot, especially if you're getting paid good money, or if you're going to make good money from a shot you might sell. No way, not chancing it. I'm doing autofocus all the way, but I go out with my family, we go apple picking, we go to the beach. Oh, I love the manual focus lenses. It slows you down, it makes you think, focus. Okay, now smile, right? That's how it used to be. Hang on, I'm just focusing right now. Okay, now smile, and you take the picture, right? Right now, we take pictures of everything. And I've covered this in one of those videos with film versus digital and what you can learn from a film photographer. One of the things is that it slows us down, right? I shoot with my digital camera, and I'll shoot a picture and I'll look at it later and I'll decide if I want to keep it or not. No. My medium format digital film camera, those rolls are expensive. I take one with me and it has 10 pictures in it. 10! So when I'm going to frame something, I have to ask myself, do I really need this shot? Do I really want it that bad? Because my day is just starting, and if I do this picture, I have 9 left. And then if I do another one later, I have 8 left. So I'm really careful. I don't really need this. I see more bushes like that over there. Let me take a walk. Worst case, I can come back later, right? You're going to start thinking, and it's going to slow you down, and that's part of the process. It's part of the creative process. There's a time for focus, manual focus. There's a time for autofocus. I won't say digital focus. There's a time for autofocus. Listen to what people are doing with their lenses and either agree with them or disagree with them. But when you disagree with them, don't say, no, that's dumb, that's not right. Just say, okay, I see what you're doing, but listen, hear me out here. Look at what I do with my lens. Do you think some of that might benefit you? They might say no. They might say yeah, right? But the whole point is learn from each other. One very good reason for shooting manual lenses, I can tell you right off the bat, $98. And a vintage lens that used to cost $1,000, I got for $300. So, money. They're cheaper, right? Yeah, okay, they're manual focus, all right. Bokeh, 1.2. Canon doesn't make anything like that for that camera, right? If I want good bokeh, I have to buy either vintage or a new manual focus lens. This camera is front heavy because this lens is all metal. The lenses that come for this camera are plastic, right? This is that cheap kit lens, the 15-45, which is actually a 24-70. There's another better kit lens, which is an 11-22, which I think the equivalent is like a 16-35 or 36. That actually feels a little better and much sharper images. But this thing is front heavy. Oh my gosh. And people say, oh, I don't like it because the camera feels like it's pulling me down. I don't have a problem. I have two hands. One holds the lens, one holds the camera. I'm strong enough that I can hold the camera like this and play with it. It doesn't bother me. You see these little things? I put a wristband on one of these little guys. I put it around my wrist. It doesn't go anywhere. So that way, if I, oops, it still holds on, right? That's not a big deal. We have to stop making big deals of things that are not, right? Somebody's going to put a comment in there. It is a big deal to me. Fine. That's okay. That's why, for some people, everything's a big deal, right? And, you know, I don't get involved with that. But the other thing is that it slows me down. We talked about that. These manual focus lenses slow me down. I love that. And I can give you a list for autofocus as well, right? Faster. Many people will claim they're sharper. They might be. But the overall is just faster convenience, right? And then, of course, woo, a lot more expensive. So basically, try it before you knock it. And again, show pictures, right? If you're getting amazing results from a manual lens, pull up a few pictures on your computer, on your phone, show people. Just like I did with the film camera. When you pull up the phone or the tablet or the laptop or whatever, and you show somebody, right, or a print, and then they look at it and go, "You're right. I've never seen anything like this. This is beautiful." And then there's no argument, right? Or you're talking to a film freak like me, and you wanna prove a point, right? And he's talking about, or she's talking about how much sharper the vintage lenses are. And you take a picture with this puppy, and then you bring them to the computer and you go, okay, I hear you. You know what? I respect your opinion. Come with me to my computer. Let me just show you a picture. And then that picture of my daughter's eye where you can see, practically read the freaking car's license plate. They're going to go, oh! And then you're going to go, see, I've been trying to tell you, right? Showing is the best way. So that covers the 8 very popular arguments that come up in photography, how to deal with them, and then apply some of these things to life too, right? Conclusion, we're here. Photography is no different than any other topic or subject in the world. There's going to be arguments. People argue about car brands, about engine sizes, about tire types, about electric versus gasoline. There'll be arguments till the end of time, right? The important thing is here, being prudent, right? Being civil, and learning as much as we can, and teaching as much as we can. And I'll repeat a couple of these points. Number 1, stay humble, right? You can't ever learn anything when you think you know it all already. It's going to be impossible. Pick a topic. If you think you know it all, you might know more than many people, but you don't know it all. And sometimes, even though a person doesn't know, they'll say something that triggers a thought, right? Keep your mind open. Be humble. Number 2, be genuinely curious. Think like a child again. We used to all think like childs. Our conversations are going to be friendlier and more interesting. You ever see 2 little kids that don't know each other? One's playing with something, the other one kind of looks over, sits with him. What is that? Oh, it's this thing. Oh, I have this. Oh, I've never seen that before. And before you know it, they're having a conversation. Are they arguing about mine is better, yours is better, or mine is better, the colors are prettier? Most of the time, no. They're curious. They want to see, they want to learn. I like your toy, right? Can I play with that for a little while? And I lend you mine. You can play with mine. Sure. I've never played with that one either, right? So that mindset, and be curious. The curiosity of learning something is going to keep your mind open in an argument. It's going to keep it more friendly, right? And you'll actually be able to learn something. Number 3, study and learn. We can't make a good point about any of these things when we don't really understand the subject matter. How can I try to convince you that film is any good if I've never shot film? I've just read about it. Or if I've shot film and I don't know anything else about it, right? I actually read a book on how film works, how the granules and pick up the light and change color, and it's a phenomenal process, right? But if I don't understand, I'm trying to convince you that film is worth trying. Maybe if I sit down and I draw for you how film works, some people are turned on by technology and science. And if I explain that to a person that I know is a techie, they're going to go, I had no idea it worked that way. I'd love to try it just to see what I get, right? So it's all about, we have to understand what we're doing, right? Understand digital if you're going to be a big proponent for digital. And understand what I said earlier. You have to understand your opposition if you're going to try to convince them of something that's better than theirs. If we don't understand what they have and what they use, we can't tell them that what we have is better. It doesn't work that way. You have to understand both. That's the key thing here, that please walk away. If everything else you forgot, walk away with this. We cannot have an argument. We cannot have an argument if we don't understand both sides. I've seen people arguing things like religion, two religions, and they only know their religion, and they're trying to tell the other side that this religion's better. And I've seen people who actually read both books and studied both and studied religion their whole life, and they can quote both books. And when they're sitting there trying to tell the other person, they don't actually tell them that their religion is better. Because when you know that much, you're wiser and you're more careful about the words you choose. They actually, when you hear them, they actually say, this is what your book says, this is what my book says, this is how I think we're speaking the same language with different words. You see what happens there? When you learn the other side, you realize that it's actually a lot closer to your side than you thought. You're going to find this to be true with people. People of different races and colors and religions hate each other. And when you actually take the time, when those people take the time to learn about the other side, they realize we all want the same thing. We all want protection for our families. We all want to eat. We want to be happy. We want to make progress. We want to learn, right? We want to work. We want to contribute to society. We're not all that different, folks. So I don't want to, digress again because I do it 100 times in each video. I'm sorry for that. But I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you got something out of it. I hope it made you think. That's always the goal here, is to make us all a little more thoughtful, right? Love you guys. I really do. That kiss goes to you. Please take care of yourselves. I will catch you in the next video. Drink your water and ciao for now.